My name's Daniel Cole. I'm 43 now, sitting in a little rental outside Spokane. November rain on the window, 2024. I shouldn't be telling this, but it's been 13 years, and the old phone's about to die anyway. Back then it was late August 2011, up near the south end of the Cascades in Washington. Solo camping, cheap green tent, coffee on a single burner stove, pine smoke in my clothes. Normal trip. Long weekend to clear my head after the divorce. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the tent ripped open like wet paper. There was a smell, wet fur and river mud, and something big circling in the dark. I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I laughed at the word. A native elder changed that. What I saw in Bigfoot's cabin, what it said about humans, still keeps me listening for 3 knocks at night. Before we continue this shocking story, we encourage you to subscribe to the channel, as we are trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. I was 29, overworked IT tech from Portland, trying to prove I wasn't afraid of being alone. The sky was that flat gray blue you only get out here, and everything smelled like damp moss and truck exhaust from the last RV that pulled out. I pitched my faded green tent on Site 14, right up against the tree line. The gravel crunched under my boots, dust on my jeans, hands smelling like nylon and cold metal from the tent stakes. I set my blue enamel mug on the picnic table, little white chips along the rim like teeth marks. My whole life for the weekend fit in that mug, a cooler and a cheap lantern. At the pay station, there was a sun-faded flyer about local wildlife. Elk, black bear, cougar. A handwritten note in the corner. Ask about Bigfoot. Someone had doodled big feet underneath. I snorted, told myself, yeah, sure, Bigfoot. Okay. A ranger truck rolled past, country radio leaking through the open window. 2 guys in the back of a pickup laughed as they drove by, one of them calling out, "Watch for that Bigfoot they talk about." I waved them off, told myself it was just local tourist bait. But even then, the wind in the trees had a hollow, knocking sound that made me glance back at the dark line of firs and think, I'm not as alone as I want to be. The Forest Service campground sat 40 miles south of any real town, tucked into a valley where cell service flickered in and out. The creek ran cold and fast, fed by snowmelt still trickling down from higher peaks. Most sites were empty that Friday, just a couple of RVs near the entrance, their generators grumbling against the quiet. I cooked instant ramen on my single burner, steam rising into the cooling air. The smell of propane and cheap noodles mixed with pine. Somewhere down the loop, a dog barked twice, then stopped. The silence afterward felt heavier than it should have. I still don't know why I picked the site closest to where those knocks seemed to start. The camp went quiet fast. One RV generator died with a cough, and then it was just the soft patter of drizzle in the creek, and my own breathing. The lantern threw this weak amber circle on the tent wall. Everything outside was just a darker kind of dark. I lay on my sleeping bag, still in my hoodie, the smell of instant coffee and smoke clinging to it. My phone lay face down beside me, screen black, as if I'd already decided there'd be nothing worth taking a picture of. Somewhere after the rain picked up, I heard it. 3 knocks, not branches in the wind, not random. 1, 2, 3. Like someone tapping a bat against a distant tree. Hollow, precise, with the creek going quiet between each one. My first thought was some kids messing around. My second thought, a little quieter, was the word from the flyer. Bigfoot. I hate even saying it, but it popped in there, and I immediately argued with myself. It's a woodpecker, I whispered. It's just wind. I checked the tent zipper, checked the little padlock on my cooler twice, even though I knew it wouldn't stop a raccoon, let alone a bear or anything. The smell of wet earth crept in through the vents. Pine and something heavier, like a dog that's been in a river. I told myself it was a wet stump, rolled over, and pulled the sleeping bag over my head. The knocks came from somewhere up the slope, maybe 100 yards into the trees, not close enough to see anything. Close enough to know something was out there. The rain muffled other sounds, turning the forest into a hushed room where every small noise felt amplified. I counted my breaths. In for 4, out for 4. The kind of thing they teach you in therapy after panic attacks. The fabric of the tent rippled slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel inside. Around midnight, the rain faded to nothing. The silence that replaced it was complete. No wind, no creek babble filtering through, just my heartbeat in my ears and the faint creak of trees settling. But the rain faded, and those 3 knocks kept replaying in my head long after everything outside went silent again. I woke up to cold air on my legs. That's the first clear memory. Cold air and the sound of Velcro being peeled wrong, but it wasn't Velcro. It was my tent wall. There was this long, ripping sound, low to high, as the fabric tore open from the bottom up. The lantern was off. The only light came from a strip of pale sky through the new opening, and maybe the soft glow of some RV down the loop. I could feel the texture of the sleeping bag under my fingertips, the cheap polyester because I was gripping it so hard. Something moved just beyond that slit of gray. Heavy steps in the gravel, not hurried. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. The smell came with it, pushing into the tent like breath, wet fur, river mud, and something metallic, like blood or old coins. I didn't look. That's the part people always question, and I get it. Why didn't you shine the light, Daniel? Why didn't you film it? Bigfoot, man, you could have proved Bigfoot. Because I was alone and my body didn't care what my brain wanted. My hand hovered over the lantern switch and didn't move. I just stared at that torn flap, watching it flutter. The footsteps circled half the tent, then stopped on the tree side, close enough that I heard a low, rough exhale. Bear, I told myself. Bear. Say bear. Don't say Bigfoot. You start saying Bigfoot at 3 a.m. in a half-collapsed tent, and you don't come back from that. The breathing was deep and measured, not the pant of a dog or the huff of a bear. Something slower, more deliberate. Like whatever was out there was thinking, deciding. My muscles locked. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to stay still, stay quiet, become invisible. The tent pole beside my head creaked under some invisible pressure, bending inward slightly before springing back. After what felt like forever, the footsteps receded into the trees. The creak grew louder again, like it had been holding its breath too. Right before dawn, when the sky was finally going from black to dull blue, I heard it again from up the slope behind me. 3 knocks, just as slow and spaced as before. I still don't know if those 3 knocks were leaving, or a promise to come back. In the morning, the damage looked almost embarrassing. My tent wall was shredded from midway down, the edges frayed, claw marks, or what I told myself were claw marks, raking out toward the guy line. The cooler had been nudged, not raided. No trash scattered, no bear prints I could see. Just those deep, weird, boot-shaped holes in the damp dirt near the tree line. I stood there holding the flap of torn nylon in my hands, fingers numb despite the mild air, when a voice called over the sound of the creek. "You camping or moving out?" I turned. A small camp I hadn't really noticed the day before sat closer to the river. 2 big canvas tents, 1 old 5th-wheel trailer, and a blue tarp strung between trees. Smoke from their fire drifted sideways, carrying the smell of bacon and spruce. An older man with long gray hair tied back under a faded ball cap waved me over with the hand that wasn't holding a chipped mug. His jacket was patched, his jeans stained with engine grease and pine pitch. "We heard something come through last night," he said as I approached, boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. "You from Site 14? "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding younger than it should have. "Something tore my tent. Probably just a bear." He looked past me toward the trees, his eyes going flat and distant for a second. "Bear doesn't usually knock first." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Knock?" He tapped his knuckles 3 times on the picnic table between us. Hollow, wooden, exactly the rhythm I'd heard in the night. "Some folks around here," he said quietly, "they'd say that was a Bigfoot asking if you knew whose path you slept on." The word hung in the air between us. Bigfoot. Not whispered like a joke, but spoken plain like he'd said deer or hawk. I opened my mouth to argue. Instead, I just stared at the steam rising from his coffee and pretended the chill up my spine was just the morning air. A woman emerged from one of the canvas tents, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Joe, you scaring the tourists again?" She smiled at me, warm but knowing. "Don't mind him. He likes his stories." But Joseph, that's what she called him, didn't smile back. He just kept looking at those trees, his weathered face unreadable. I didn't know it then, but that was the first time Bigfoot was spoken to me like a neighbor instead of a joke, and the fire between us hissed like it knew I'd heard the 3 knocks too. His name was Joseph, but everyone around the camp called him Uncle Joe, or just the old man. He told me he was a tribal elder from a community farther east, up in the hills. They came out here every summer, same spot, same canvas tents, same fire ring lined with river stones. "Come on," he said after breakfast, grabbing a carved walking stick from where it leaned against a stump. Feathers and beads dangled from the top, clicking softly as he moved. "Let's see who visited you." We walked up a little service path behind the last campsite. The air felt cooler in the shade, smelling like wet cedar and rust. My breath puffed a little, even though it wasn't that cold, just nerves, I guess. The mud back there was darker, softer, holding impressions like memory foam. That's where I saw them. 2 depressions, heel to toe, side by side. Not sharp like a boot tread, no laces, no pattern. Just shape, each one easily as long as my forearm. "Could be a logger with big boots," I said automatically. My voice sounded thin over the distant rush of the creek. "Somebody messing with tourists. People love the whole Bigfoot thing." Joseph didn't argue. He just crouched, his jacket creaking, and hovered his hand over the print without touching it. "Logger doesn't walk right up to people's tents, not in the dark," he said, "and logger steps lighter than this. A Bigfoot doesn't realize how heavy it is when it gets curious." The word hung there. Bigfoot. It felt wrong and right at the same time, like swearing in church. I shook my head. I don't really believe in Bigfoot stuff," I muttered. "I'm sure there's an explanation." He just tapped his stick 3 times lightly on a nearby alder trunk. The sound carried farther than it should have. From way up on the slope, too far to see anything, came a faint answer. A single, dull thump. My stomach dropped. The forest seemed to lean in closer, waiting. "Sometimes," Joseph said quietly, eyes never leaving the trees. "The explanation isn't about belief. It's about respect." I stared at those prints until the edges started to blur in the filtered light, and I told myself again that some kid carved them with a shovel. But the smell of wet fur and river mud drifted in on the breeze like the night hadn't ended. The trees creaked overhead, branches moving in wind I couldn't feel down here. Birds had gone quiet, not silent, but careful, like they were watching something too. I kept waiting for 2 more knocks to follow that single thump. They never did, and that unsettled me more than if I'd heard all 3. By late afternoon, I'd basically moved into their camp without meaning to. My shredded tent sagged up on Site 14 like a warning flag, and I kept finding excuses not to go back up there alone. Joseph's family, 2 adult kids, a couple of grandkids, a teenage nephew named Kyle, treated me like a stray dog that wandered in and wouldn't leave. They handed me a folding chair by the river, passed over a paper plate with fried trout and potatoes from a cast iron pan blackened with age. The air smelled like fish, wood smoke, and the faint plastic tang of someone's old lawn chair. "You gonna tell your buddies the Bigfoot tore your house up?" Kyle grinned, flipping a flat rock into the current. "You'll get 1,000,000 views with that, man." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, Bigfoot trashes my tent. Gone wrong, right?" I said. "I don't even think it was... I'm not saying it was Bigfoot. Could have been anything." Joseph, sitting slightly apart on an overturned milk crate, just watched the water slide past the rocks. The sun was low and amber, making the mist off the river glow. "Where I'm from," he said eventually, his voice barely above the water. "We don't say the word Bigfoot to make fun of it. We say it like we're talking about an uncle who moved away but still sends letters." I shifted in my chair, the metal arms cold under my fingers. You really think a Bigfoot did that to my tent? He shrugged. A Bigfoot doesn't like people sleeping on its trails. They move along the same routes for generations. They hear us, smell us, remember us. They know when we forget them. He pointed with his chin toward the darkening tree line above the campground. Those 3 knocks you heard? That's asking. You know I'm here? Kyle's mother brought over a plate of fry bread, still warm, dusted with cinnamon sugar. She set it on the arm of my chair without a word, but her eyes said, "Listen to him." The evening cooled fast, the sky going from gold to muted blue. The kids' voices got softer, the clink of plates fading as people drifted toward the fire. I told myself again it was wind, or some hunter playing jokes. But my eyes kept sliding back to the trees, to the spots where the trunks lined up just right to hide anything that didn't want to be seen. Across the river, something moved through the brush. Probably a deer. Probably just branches catching light. But the dog by the fire lifted its head, ears forward, and didn't bark. I didn't say it out loud, but I was already counting. 1 knock, 2, 3, waiting to hear if they'd come back with the dark. That second night, they wouldn't let me sleep up on Site 14. "We got room," Joseph's daughter insisted, patting the spare cot inside the canvas tent. "You don't need to be up there with that flap of nightmare." So I moved my sleeping bag down, the fabric still smelling faintly of that metallic animal stink. The inside of their big tent glowed warm from a propane lantern, shadows of hanging coats and gear swaying on the walls like people. Outside, rain drummed steady on the tarp, a different rhythm from the first night, more constant, less broken. Before we turned in, Joseph did something that stuck with me. He took a small woven basket, handmade, rough but careful, and filled it with fry bread and a few slices of apple. He walked it to the edge of the trees behind the trailer and set it on an old stump. "For the neighbors," he said when he came back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "For the ones that walk at night, Bigfoot or otherwise." I almost made a joke about bribing Bigfoot. The word felt strange in my mouth, like a borrowed language. Instead, I kept quiet. Around midnight, the dog, an old black mutt that had barely lifted its head all day, sat up and stared at the trees. No bark, just this soft whine, ears pinned back. The hair on my arms lifted. Then we heard it. 3 knocks, closer this time. 1, 2, 3. Not far up the slope like before, right at the edge where the firelight didn't quite reach. The lantern buzzed louder, or maybe my ears just cut out the other sounds. Even the rain seemed to hold steady, like it was listening. From the darkness came a low whistle, 2 notes, not quite human, not quite animal. It moved from left to right, like something pacing just out of sight. Joseph whispered, "That's a Bigfoot saying, 'We see you, we hear you.'" I wanted to call it a bird, a trick of the wind, some drunk guy messing around. Instead, I lay there staring at the flap of the tent, every wrinkle in the canvas sharp in the lantern's amber light, breathing in the smells of damp fabric and wood smoke and the faint, sour tang drifting in from outside. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the tent now, small clouds that disappeared into the dim light above. Kyle's mother pulled an extra blanket over her youngest, who slept through everything, face peaceful in the glow. The knocks didn't come again that night, but the pause after them stretched so long that my mind filled it with footsteps. I didn't sleep. I just waited, counting under my breath, sure that when I hit 3 again, something would answer. Morning came in slow shades of gray. The rain had backed off to a mist, hanging low over the creek and beating on the blue tarp. The ground sucked at my boots when I stepped outside, mud clinging like it didn't want to let go. Joseph sat by the fire, poking at the coals with his walking stick. The basket from the night before sat empty on the stump, fry breadcrumbs scattered like it had snowed flour. No raccoon tracks, no dog prints, just a big vague smudge in the soft earth near it, like something had knelt or leaned there. "Sleep?" he asked. Not really, I said. My voice sounded hollow even to me. Those knocks. That whistle. I keep telling myself it was wind or some hunter. I don't want to be the guy who comes home talking about Bigfoot. He waited a beat. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks up into the damp air. Most folks who see a Bigfoot don't talk about it, he said. Not because they're scared of the Bigfoot, because they're scared of people. He sipped his coffee, then set the mug on the stones, steam drifting. You want to see where one sleeps? I thought he was joking. I laughed, then saw he wasn't. The sound died in my throat. You mean a Bigfoot? Like, really? There's somewhere you think a Bigfoot actually lives? Cabin's not the right word, he said, but that's what you'll think when you see it. Been there twice in my life. I don't take just anybody. He glanced at my shredded tent up the hill. But you've already been noticed. Every rational part of me screamed no. Go home. Patch the tent. Tell your buddies it was a bear. Forget Bigfoot. Instead, I heard myself say, yeah, show me. Joseph nodded once. Slow. He stood, bones cracking, and tapped his stick 3 times on the fire ring stone. Then you walk quiet, he said, and you listen more than you talk. Bigfoot already knows how loud we are. The mist seemed to swallow the sound of his stick, and I wondered if somewhere in the trees, someone, or something, had just heard our agreement. Kyle looked up from where he was coiling a rope. You really taking him up there, Uncle? Joseph didn't answer, just shouldered a small pack and started walking toward the service trail. I followed, my heart already racing before we'd even left the clearing. The campground sounds faded behind us, the hiss of the gas stove, voices murmuring, a truck door closing somewhere down the loop. Ahead, the forest waited, dark and patient, smelling of rot and growth and something older than names. We left the campground by a side path I hadn't noticed before, skirting a no motorized vehicles sign half swallowed by brambles. The farther we walked, the more the sounds of the RVs and kids faded, replaced by the hush of wet needles and the occasional creak of a tree leaning into another. The air cooled as we gained elevation, the smell of damp earth thick, every breath like inhaling a basement. Moss coated everything, rocks, stumps, even the lower trunks of trees, muting the colors into greens and browns and that soft blue shadow that lives under firs. Joseph walked ahead, his boots finding places mine didn't see. His walking stick tapped roots and stones, sometimes 3 quick taps in a row, sometimes none. I couldn't tell if he was signaling something or just keeping rhythm. You're sure you want to see where a Bigfoot stays? He asked over his shoulder once. I'm sure I probably shouldn't, I said, stepping over a slick fallen log. But I can't go home pretending I didn't hear those knocks. I still don't know if I believe in Bigfoot, not really. But I believe in what happened to my tent. He made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Belief's a TV word. Bigfoot doesn't care if you believe. Bigfoot cares how you behave. We passed a cluster of stones stacked in a little balanced tower on a stump, too deliberate to be random. Farther on, strips of bark had been peeled from a birch trunk in long, clean ribbons, hanging like curtains. On another stump, someone, or something, had left a line of bright objects. A rusted pocket knife, a red bottle cap, a marble, a piece of blue glass. People drop their world all over the woods, Joseph said. Sometimes a Bigfoot picks it up. They like the shiny, harmless pieces best. A woodpecker hammered on a dead tree to our left. The sound echoed hard, rapid, chaotic, nothing like the 3 even knocks I'd heard. Still, I flinched. I told myself I was walking towards some old hermit's campsite, that Joseph was humoring me, maybe testing me. But the deeper we went, the more the forest felt watched, not hostile, just aware, like a room that knows you don't live there. Every time the wind died, I caught that faint, sour, sweet smell again. Wet fur and river mud, laced now with smoke long faded. The trail narrowed. Branches caught at my jacket, leaving wet streaks. My boots slipped on exposed roots. Joseph never looked back, just kept that steady pace, stick tapping, breath even. I kept waiting for those 3 knocks to break the silence and either prove or break whatever was building in my chest. We crested a small rise, and the ground dipped into a shallow bowl. That's where the forest changed. It wasn't dramatic. No stone circle, no bones, nothing like that. Just tidier. The brush was pushed back in a rough circular clearing. Fallen branches weren't in chaos. They were leaned and woven together over a frame of thicker limbs, forming a low, slant-roofed shelter tucked between 3 firs. Bits of blue tarp, a strip of corrugated metal, and what looked like an old truck bed liner patched holes in the roof. "Cabin," Joseph murmured. "That's your word, not mine." We stood at the edge, not crossing some invisible line he seemed to know. The air felt warmer here, like the bowl held breath. The smell hit me first, stronger than before, a layered scent of wet fur, old smoke, and the sour tang of sweat that reminded me, horribly, of locker rooms. Inside the open side of the shelter, I could make out shapes. A flattened area lined with collected ferns and what might have once been a sleeping bag, now torn and rearranged. A neat row of metal cans, cleaned and stacked by size on a rock ledge. A crate filled with objects. A red toy truck with 1 wheel missing. A child's blue rain boot. 3 worn baseballs. A handful of feathers tied together with twine. My throat went dry. This is where somebody lives," I whispered. "Some person, some hunter, a hermit. This isn't Bigfoot, this is..." "Why's there no fire ring?" Joseph asked quietly. "Why no tools? Why no clothes? Why no sharp things left lying around?" I swallowed. There were no knives, no axes, no empty shell casings, no beer cans. Just toys, soft things, shiny scraps. Joseph knelt slowly, never stepping into the clearing. He pointed with his stick to the crate of toys. "We found some of these missing from a trailhead once. Little girl's backpack got taken. Nothing dangerous, nothing with an edge. Just her toys, 1 shoe. We followed the signs, came here. Bigfoot brought them." The word made my skin prickle. Bigfoot. Here. "It's like a museum of us," I said, voice shaking. "Except Bigfoot leaves out the worst parts." Joseph nodded. "Bigfoot sees what we do. How we fight. How we drink, hit, throw our trash. But a Bigfoot also sees how we carry babies, how we play, how we share food around a fire. So Bigfoot keeps the gentle pieces, like Bigfoot saying, 'This is what you could be if you remembered.'" The shock hit me then. Not that Bigfoot might be real, but that Bigfoot might understand us better than we understand ourselves. A small feather, white tipped and brown, lay on a rock by my foot. It fluttered, though there was no wind. From deeper in the trees, behind and above the shelter, came 3 very soft knocks. 1, 2, 3. I didn't move. Neither did Joseph. The knocks weren't a threat. They felt embarrassed somehow, like someone clearing their throat in the back of a room. My heart hammered. "Bigfoot is here," I whispered. "A Bigfoot is actually here, watching us." Joseph's eyes were damp when he looked at me. "Now you see why we don't talk about Bigfoot on the internet," he said. "Bigfoot's house tells the truth about us. People aren't ready for that." The silence that followed said more than any proof ever could. We backed away from the bowl like we were leaving a church we'd accidentally walked into mid-prayer. Joseph never turned his back fully, just edged sideways, until a screen of saplings hid the shelter from view. The sky had darkened while we stood there. Clouds clotted over the ridge, turning the light flat and blue-gray. The temperature dropped enough that I could see my breath in quick little bursts. The smell of rain was coming, clean and sharp under the lingering musk. "Don't look for Bigfoot's face," Joseph said softly. "Bigfoot doesn't owe you that." Of course, I looked. Partway up the slope, between 2 firs where the trunks framed a narrow gap, there was a darker vertical shape. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't still like bark either. The outline was wrong. too wide for a person in a coat, too tall to be anyone I'd ever met. I couldn't see features, just shadow against slightly lighter shadow. Something in that darkness shifted, a weight readjusted. A branch near it bent slowly, not snapping, like a hand resting heavier on a railing. I couldn't breathe. Every part of me screamed to run. At the same time, some other part whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself in front of Bigfoot. That's a ridiculous thought, I know." I still had it. Joseph lifted his stick and tapped it on a rock 3 times. 1, 2, 3. He bowed his head slightly and said something in his language, words thick and round in his mouth. Then, in English, barely audible over the rising wind, "We're sorry. We won't bring more. This one was already called." The shape between the trees let out a long, slow exhale. You could hear it over the wind, a low whoosh, like someone letting tension out of their lungs after holding it too long. The surrounding brush shivered once, like something large had shifted its weight. I didn't get closer. I didn't raise my phone. I didn't speak the word Bigfoot out loud. It felt like saying someone's name at a funeral. As we turned to go, thunder rumbled far off. The first drops of rain hit my face, cold and clean, washing the smell of musk back down into the earth. Halfway down the slope, almost lost in the sound of the breeze and my own heartbeat, I heard them again. 3 very distant knocks, spaced out like the ones from my first night. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a door closing. I pulled out my phone then, hands shaking, and managed to record 31 seconds of shaky footage. Just the bowl, the edge of the shelter, my own breathing, and at the end, those 3 soft knocks. Joseph's voice muttering, "That's enough. I never posted it. Still haven't. It sits on that old cracked Android in my drawer, battery barely holding, waiting for a decision I'll never make." I've spent years wondering if those knocks were Bigfoot telling us to forget, or to remember quietly. The forest feels farther away now, but it's never really left. I'm sitting at a wobbly kitchen table, laptop closed, old Android phone plugged into a frayed cable like it's on life support. The screen's cracked in a spider web from when I dropped it on a job site years ago. The battery barely holds a charge. On that phone is a 31-second clip I almost deleted 100 times. It's not clear, just a slow pan across that bowl in the woods, the edge of Bigfoot's cabin, visible between trees, the crate of toys, the stacked cans, my own shaky breathing loud in the mic. At the end, if you crank the volume, you can hear 3 soft knocks and Joseph muttering, "That's enough." I never posted it. Not because I couldn't use the money or the attention. God knows there were nights I stared at the upload button, thinking about views, about people finally hearing me when I said Bigfoot. But then I'd remember the way that clearing felt, like someone's bedroom, not a crime scene. The way Bigfoot's collection of our gentle things told a better story than any of my words could. There's a cardboard box under the table. Inside is the shredded panel of my old tent, still faintly smelling of mildew and something animal, and the walking stick Joseph gave me years later when his knees got too bad for long hikes. The feathers on it are faded now, beads dull. Sometimes at night when the traffic dies down and the fridge cycles off, the apartment gets very quiet. Too quiet. In that stillness, if the rain is hitting the window just right, I hear it underneath. 1 knock. 2. 3. I tell myself it's the building settling. Pipes. Neighbors. Anything but Bigfoot checking in on whether I kept my promise. I still say Bigfoot softly, under my breath, like I'm talking about someone I knew who moved away. I went back once. I don't tell many people that part. September 2018, just before the fires got bad that year. I drove up alone, parked at the same general area. Though the campground looked rougher, more trash, more signs, fewer people. Joseph couldn't make the trip anymore. His daughter told me, "If you go respectful. You remember what Bigfoot showed you." I followed the trail as best I remembered. The forest had shifted like it does. Trees down, new growth, game trails veering. I still found the rise, the dip, the shape of that bowl. The cabin was gone. No woven branches, no tarp pieces, no crate of toys. Just a circle of earth where the moss hadn't grown back yet, and 3 stones stacked in a little tower in the center. Feathers lay around it, weathered to almost nothing. I stood there a long time, listening. No knocks, no whistles, just the wind combing the treetops and the occasional crack of a branch somewhere I couldn't see. I whispered Bigfoot once, just to see how it felt without Joseph there. The word seemed to disappear as soon as it left my mouth, soaked up by the trees. I haven't been back since. Now, sitting here with the rain on the window and this recorder app running on my new phone, I keep thinking about that empty circle, about how Bigfoot packed up our gentle pieces and moved on, or buried them, or hid them deeper where people like me won't stumble in with shaking hands and half-charged phones. When people roll their eyes and say, "You and your Bigfoot story, man," I don't argue anymore. I just think about a place in the woods where someone who wasn't human tried to understand what was best about us and built a home out of it. A minute ago, while I was talking, something in the wall made a sound. Could have been the heater. Could have been a neighbor. 3 dull knocks. 1, 2, 3. Probably nothing. Probably everything. I know how it sounds. But on nights like this, I still turn off the lights, sit by the window in the cold blue glow of the street lamp, and listen. Because whether anyone believes me or not, I heard 3 knocks again last night.